Hi, thank you for coming back for another story. Tonight I'm going to talk about my UFO experience that I had with a really good friend of mine, along with several thousand people that also saw it. This was back in the early 1980s. We were on 8 Mile Road traveling from Ferndale to Hazel Park because she had lived in Hazel Park and I was living in Ferndale, and we would go back and forth to each other's houses. If you've ever been to Michigan on 8 Mile Road in Detroit, Eminem kind of made that famous with his movie 8 Mile. It's a 4-lane road going east and a 4-lane road going west. And then in the middle is a median. So what I'm trying to get across, it's huge. We're heading east down 8 Mile Road. And when you get to John R. Road, we're in the left-hand lane. We're getting ready to turn and head north on John R. Road. As we approach John R. Road, and we had just come to a stop waiting for the light to turn green, and we're kind of looking around, and she said to me, she goes, "What is everybody looking at?" I looked up because I was driving from my driver's side window, and I said, "Oh my God." And so she's looking from inside of the car. She is looking up, and I opened up the door. As I opened up the door and I looked back up, everybody, they were all stopped. People were out of their vehicles everywhere, and everybody was looking up. This craft that we saw, this spaceship, whatever you want to call it, now I refer to it as a mothership after I've heard like people's experiences and everything. It was absolutely gigantic. It went beyond both sides of 8 Mile, and it was round. I just remember looking up to the bottom of it, and there were lights, but the one thing is it was completely silent, and it was just hovering there. I don't know how I got there. All I know is it was there, and it was literally right above our heads. However many feet up, the wiring, the telephone lines, the electrical lines, it was hovering right there, and it was not moving, and we were all looking at it. I have no idea how long we were there looking at it. I just remember not blinking, not being able to believe what I saw. But it wasn't like I was thinking, "Oh, what's this? Oh, what's going on? What's it doing?" There was nothing like that. It felt like it was a moment, but I have no idea how long we were there. Here's something interesting. The next thing that I remember is in the blink of an eye, it was like, shh, it was gone, and it was completely and totally silent. But when I watched it leave, I was sitting inside the car with the door still open. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember having any other thoughts. And I looked over at my friend, and she looked at me, and I said, "We got to hurry up and get back to your house and call the police." And she's like, "What was that?" It's like, "I don't know, but we got to call the police." Everybody just got back in their car, whatever they were doing. Being in the early 1980s, we didn't have like cell phones that we could call the police, or, we just didn't have anything like that. We got back to her house, and I went inside. Her husband was there at the time. My husband was there, and she had 3 kids at this time. Her youngest was her son, and at this time he was about 8 years old at this time. She's sitting outside on the porch. I'm inside. I'm grabbing the phone. I'm trying to call the police. The phone lines are jammed. We could not get through. I kept calling and calling and calling Took me about 20 minutes to get through. I'm talking to her at the front door. She's sitting on the porch, like my husband, her husband, they're outside. And we're like, oh my God, we seen this UFO, we seen a spacecraft. And her son was he was a very intelligent, very reserved, observant, just really, really a brilliant kid. He was just intently listening to what we were saying. And I was getting really pissed because I could not get through the police. I couldn't get through it. All the lines were jammed. Took probably about 15 or 20 minutes to get through to them. When I got through to the police, I didn't get a chance to say anything. A police officer answered the phone, and it was a lady. And she said, if you are calling about the flying saucer or flying object, we already have reports, and then hung up the phone. And I was like, whoa. So I told them what had happened, and I said, well, I guess we don't have to report it because hundreds or thousands of people are probably reporting it to all the police departments. This gets really strange. That was a really big deal that evening. A couple hours later, the evening winds down, me and my husband, we take off, we go back home, and it was like the longer period of time that went by, the more we completely and totally forgot about it. Like it was just being erased from our memories. Strangely enough, the next day when we woke up, and we didn't even realize this until years later, it was like we forgot about everything. Like it never existed. Me and my friend at that time, we were together all the time. Every single day we were on the phone or we were together, we were with each other. Her children were like my first set of kids before I started having kids. Extremely close. And it just didn't come up again for years and years and years. So we're sitting on the front porch. It was something about the way that we were sitting on the front porch and where we were all sitting. But she was next to me on the swing because they had this porch swing. It was an old like country style porch swing with a railing around it. And I was sitting there, and then her son was standing virtually where he was 20 years after the fact. He is an adult now, 28-year-old grown man. Her husband is standing on the porch, and there must have been something about the familiarity of how we were all sitting or what we were doing, or maybe the energy that was being created at the time. I looked at her, and then I looked at her son, and I said, oh my God, remember that time we saw the UFO? And she looks at me and she goes, yeah, I haven't thought about that in years. She's like it was just wiped out of our memory or something. And then her son, who was like 8 years old at the time, he goes, I remember. He goes, I remember when you guys got home. He's like, Cindy, I remember when you were trying to call the police and you couldn't get through. And then they answered it and told you they had already got the report from the UFO. I couldn't believe that he had remembered so much of that. He literally articulated the entire scenario that had happened about 20 years before that. We started talking about it. And then we started talking about like going to bed and the next day and literally forgetting all about it. We had not mentioned that in like 20 years. As we started talking, everything came back to us, all of the events, everything that led up to it, what happened afterwards, and I can still see it in my mind. I can still close my eyes and I can still see the bottom of it. I can still remember that it had absolutely no sound, completely and totally quiet. When it was hovering there, it was motionless. It wasn't like hovering and a little here and moving a little. It was completely and totally motionless. I just think back about that and wondering, like, what are the answers? Why did we see something like that? Why don't I remember getting back in the car? Heck, the next day after we went to sleep, why don't we remember what had happened? I mean, it's a big deal. And after that, I've watched UFO shows, on alien stuff, and never once was I like, oh my gosh, I've seen something like that. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's familiar. Like it was no big deal. That's the one thing that has always bothered me to this very day is the sequence of events, particularly the forgetfulness. What was it doing there? Why was it there? Did everybody forget? Did it go away? I even went so far as about 10 years ago to see if I could dig anything up about the mass sighting in the early 1980s over 8 Mile Road in, Hazel Park, Ferndale, Detroit, because right there is where kind of everything converges, right at John R. Road and 8 Mile Road. I just really couldn't find anything. It would be really interesting if this video would find somebody that was there, that remembers it, that had seen it. I'm really hoping that that's what happens. I'm hoping this video finds somebody and maybe they'll put a comment. But thank you very much for listening to my UFO story. Have a great evening.